Goeiedag! Good day, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world. Now, as my older subscribers know, I'm a historian. I love history. And I obviously love the facts being correct. Factual shit. Okay? Not like the fake mainstream media and the way history is rewritten. And I got a very, very lengthy but very interesting email from Gerard, who sends me a lot of good stuff. And he writes, "History has taught us that behind every truth there is a myth, and behind every myth there is a truth. But whatever lies behind every rendition we read of the past, we are constrained by what only the victors recorded, irrespective how perverted it might be. Let's take Sharpeville, a name that reverberated across the liberal world, a word that instigated hatred and disgust against the white people of South Africa. Sharpeville, a dreaded place, where the fascist white police opened fire and massacred 69 innocent people and injured 180 in a hail of submachine gunfire. How disgusting! This was an act of blatant white aggression against helpless blacks that only took part in a peaceful demonstration against carrying a passbook. How utterly disgraceful. Or was it? At least, this is what the deceptive liberal media, instigators, and secret services from within the house of Leviathan rammed into the empty heads of millions of misinformed goats across the globe. Sharpeville started the black hysteria mass riots that helped topple the white government and still are commemorated today in order to fuel hatred against the minority white people of South Africa. Let's get a bit of the background. 21st of March, the autumn equinox in the Southern Hemisphere, the communists in South Africa celebrated the anniversary of their Passover, namely the massacre at Sharpeville. Few people today know what really happened that day, how the communists offered 69 blacks to Satan and what preceded the events. Sharpeville 1960 is held up today as the single biggest massacre of blacks by whites during the years of apartheid. The truth about Sharpeville is actually quite well known for anybody who wants to do the research. So all I'm suggesting to people is that if you want to confirm what I'm talking about here, Google, okay? And I'm just going to repeat this information that Gerard has sent me, and I have no doubt it's totally correct. Okay, Robert Sobukwe, a terrorist, is hailed as a hero today. Basically, about 15,000 blacks armed with guns, pipes, and machetes, or pangas, marched on a police station manned by about 300 policemen to peacefully demonstrate against the law of having to carry a passport when visiting or working in South Africa. The march was organized by the Pan-African Congress communist Robert Sobukwe, who in typical cowardly communist fashion used women and children to do his dirty work while he was sitting in a pub in an adjacent town during the events. About 50 policemen, mostly rookies, one of which were in the service for only a month, went out to meet the crowd. The police officers were given strict orders not to shoot, but nervousness set in and one policeman dropped his weapon and a shot went off. All hell broke loose and the police started firing. 69 blacks died. The official report states that many were shot in the back, but the journalism have to be brought into question because the bodies photographed had exit wounds on their backs, where the most blood is shown. Shot in the front, small entry. Person runs away and collapses on his stomach. Bloody exit wounds on his back is photographed by BBC journalists and claims that he was shot in the back. You get the picture. If the police really wanted to commit a massacre, they could have shot wildly into the crowd, emptied their magazines, and thousands of blacks would have been killed. The fact that only 69 were killed was testimony to the discipline of resilient and restrained policemen. The Sunday night and the Monday morning preceding the massacre, and this is really what is not covered, and this is why this channel is so important, because I'm happy to put the facts out there. The Sunday night and the Monday morning preceding the massacre, the police drove the blacks back with batons and tear gas, but they still kept coming. At about 1:35 p.m. on the Sunday, they broke through the gates, and their aim was to kill every policeman inside the police station. But what gave the blacks courage and confidence to march on the police station and kill everyone inside was a horrific incident that took place about 2 months before at Cato Manor. It was a Saturday, the 25th of January 1960. A large amount of blacks came to have a family reunion and were getting drunk out of their brackets at a local shebeen, an illegal drinking spot in Cato Manor, Durban. Standard police practice was set off a 12-man patrol in certain areas and then pick them up with their captives later on. On the watch of a Sergeant Winterboer, he set off a 12-man patrol and arranged to pick them up later at the premises of a firm called Benoni NR1. The leader of the patrol was a Constable Joubert. The police arrested a man and suddenly found they were surrounded by a mob of drunken blacks who demanded the release of the prisoner. Under the circumstances, it would probably have been the best thing to do, but Constable Joubert, who had been a policeman for only 18 months, underestimated the danger. The black women started cheering on their drunken males with their traditional high-pitched tongue noises. Constable Joubert's answer was, "Only over my dead body will I let this prisoner go." At this point, a black policeman stepped on the foot of a black woman who started crying and screaming hysterically. Within a few minutes, a police patrol was surrounded by a mob of drunken blacks armed with knobkerries and machetes coming from every surrounding. Within a few minutes, the police patrol was surrounded by a mob of drunken blacks armed with knobkerries and machetes coming from them from every surrounding shack and shouting, "Kill the Boers! Kill the Boers!" Under a hail of rocks, the policemen tried to make their way back to the premises of Benoni NR1, where they hoped Sergeant Winterboer would be waiting for them, but the blacks barricaded their retreat. At this time, Sergeant Winterboer arrived at the scene, but instead of using his rifle, panicked and ran back to the police station to call for reinforcement. While he was gone, the stone throwing increased on the police patrol, and Constable Joubert made his way to a nearby avocado tree, attempting to climb it and escape the machete-wielding mob. Joubert was pulled down, and the mob of machete-wielding blacks hacked him to pieces. 2 white policemen called Kriel and Rademan and a black policeman called Ludler also tried to escape the mob. Kriel fought with his bare fists and ran almost a kilometre before he was also hacked to pieces. Rademan heard the cries of his comrade and returned to help and was also hacked to pieces. The black policeman Ludler tried to help Rademan, and he was also hacked to pieces. The body of another white policeman, Gert Rieder, was later recovered from under a heap of rocks and loaded onto a police truck. When it arrived back at the police station, Police Major Jerry van der Merwe officially saluted the slain policeman, at which point an Indian policeman saw the finger of the corpse move. His head and his body was reduced to such a bloody mess that his own parents could not even recognize him. Rieder survived, but remained for the rest of his life a useless psychological wreck. So what about the avocado tree that Joubert tried to climb? You ask. Well, about a month later, 9 blacks bought a case of beer at the local shebeen and parked off under the exact same tree and started drinking, when out of nowhere a lightning bolt hit the tree and killed all 9 blacks underneath. Coincidence? An act of God? You be the judge. The Cato Ridge incident, a flint to the Sharpeville massacre. What do you know about the Cato Manor tragedy a few weeks earlier? There the police obeyed the order not to shoot. The crowd overran the police station, and 4 whites and 5 black officers were viciously killed, their bodies dragged through the streets by blacks, with their penises cut off and stuffed into their throats. It would also have happened in Sharpeville if one frightened policeman did not open fire first as hundreds of blacks started throwing bricks and rocks at them being the police. Cato Manor was swept under the carpet by the British and South African national press, as it was not in line with the liberal press communist agenda of the day. The brutal slaying of a number of black and white policemen by a mob at Cato Manor shortly before the infamous Sharpeville massacre was still fresh in the minds of the besieged police contingent at Sharpeville. If the Sharpeville massacre had not been a massacre of protesters, it would have been another massacre of policemen. Cato Manor was even then a keg full of explosives, waiting for the right catalyst to explode at any minute. Various riots took place there. The newspapers were full of it. Major Jerry van der Merwe once appeared on the front page of a local newspaper with a bleeding face after a stone was thrown at him, which struck him in the face. All the factors and actors were present, especially over weekends. Various factors were at play. It was just a question of time. On a lazy, hazy, warm Sunday afternoon, a squad of policemen were at work. Never did they think for one moment that they would become famous in their death. Yes, when they came on duty, like thousands of policemen before then, and like the police are still doing today, they were inspected, produced their appointments and equipment, lectured to and posted to their duties. They were clean, sober and fit for duty. For the first time in our history, and so far the last time in our history, 9 members of the police force were to die. They died a horrible death. Harvey Tyson writes, Cato Manor was the key to the problem. It lay out of view of Durban and not easily noticed from the University of the Hill, dividing the bay from the overcrowded valley. Cato Manor, hidden and neglected, was notorious for its squalor and inflammability. Just more than a decade after the first Cato Manor riots, a policeman, part of a police raiding party, stepped on a woman's toe while searching a shebeen. He should not have done that, as it served as a catalyst for a new riot on that Sunday afternoon. Among the same crowded Cato Manor shanties, police made arrests for illicit possession of liquor, and on 24th of January 1960, the umpteenth riot broke out. The riot shocked South Africa. 9 policemen were dead. The Daily News reported that a black police sergeant and 4 very young white constables and 4 black constables were murdered. With 24 bullets among them, a police raiding party fought the horde of black rioters until their ammunition ran out. 3 19-year-old European constables trapped in a bungalow were massacred by the mob, who broke the doors and windows with rocks and iron bars. 3 black constables were hacked to pieces and mutilated beyond recognition. The 4th European constable ran about 400 yards before he was brought down by the mob and bludgeoned to death. The bodies of 2 more black constables were found nearby. Empty shell cases found in the rooms today indicate the desperate battle the police put up until their ammunition ran out. It was every man for himself after the white constables had emptied their revolvers into the mob. One by one, policemen leapt through doors and windows. Of the 13 who escaped, 3 were badly injured. It is regretful to report that the following 9 members of the force were murdered at Cato Manor on Sunday the 24th of January 1960 by a mob of black thugs instigated by mainly the British M5, M16 and American CIA operatives operating in black areas as NGOs. Now, that's probably a conspiracy theory, but it's part of the story. And then we have the names of the 9 people who were murdered by the black mob. You can search the web as much as you want. Eerily, you will find hundreds of pictures and much propaganda about the Sharpeville massacre. However, not one picture of the Cato Ridge massacre of the policemen. The shrewd media mobsters very deviously removed all the evidence. More than 1,000 frenzied, mad, instigated, armed black mobsters stormed the police station in Sharpeville, chanting, screaming, pelting and threatening the small band of policemen. The question is, if you were one of them, what would you do? Nelson Mandela, the world's saint. You seem to believe that Nelson Mandela was an innocent man who was jailed because he merely wanted freedom. Not so. His trial was attended by representatives of most Western countries and closely followed in the rest of the world. Documents in his own handwriting eventually convicted him. In those, he praised the communist and Marxist systems in the Soviet Union. The present ANC is simply fulfilling the ideals for which Mr. Mandela was incarcerated. Our democracy is turning into a dictatorship. I was always very protective of my country. If anyone ever said to me we could end up like our neighbour Zimbabwe, I would voraciously shout them down. However, it looks more and more possible as each day passes. The government is starting to question and control the judicial court findings. It is startling to question the freedom of the press. These are all signs. Our government has aligned itself with fellow dictatorship regimes around the world, more than democratic ones. Our very own president is not respected amongst the Western world. We are seen to be a corrupt nation on the brink of civil war again. International law is blatantly disregarded. Suddenly I'm scared. People are scared, both black and white, as what to do and who's going to save us this time. Your parents went wrong. They remembered the Churchill Street bomb, the landmines and farm roads, the Manzimtoti mail bomb, etc. The ANC never discriminated as far as their victims were concerned. Many blacks died in their bombings. Even more were burned alive and necklaced. Trust me, the legacy of the ANC is far more bloody and frightening than anything that came before. It is always easy to be an armchair judge of such an event. Many liberals, academics and journalists have criticized the police in the past. May I be allowed to comment? The police are not above criticism. I have one aspect of criticism against the defunct South African police force. Maybe because we were understaffed. But I do think our inspectorate should have done more and an internal inquiry into disasters like Bergville, Cato Manor and Sharpeville. But we were far too busy with our 24/7, 365-a-day job. More lives could have been saved if we did more honest introspection. I believe we did not learn any lessons in Sharpeville, or did we? 52 years later, the same scenario is played out, this time on a hill in Rustenburg called Marikana. On the 16th of August 2012, South African police again opened fire on a large crowd of men who had walked out on strike from a platinum mine at Marikana, about 80 miles north of Johannesburg. They shot down 112 of them, killing 34 blacks. In any country, this would have been a traumatic moment. For South Africa, it was a special kind of nightmare, since it revived images of the Sharpeville massacre, with one brutal difference. This time it was predominantly black policemen with black senior officers working for black politicians who were doing the shooting. On the morning of Saturday, the 11th of August, strikers in Marikana gathered in the football stadium and decided to march on to the NUM offices. And of course, one Cyril Hippo-Eyes Ramaphosa was very prominent in that organization back then, wasn't he? Now, the NUM offices were close by Lonmans. To protest that, union officials had been touring the shacks, urging their members to go to work. Some of the strikers were carrying sticks and chanting aggressively. The Farnham inquiry later heard that an NUM official gathered 30 of his members in their office and gave them long panga blades and at least one gun. As the strikers approached, they heard gunfire and turned and scattered. NUM men pursued them. Some strikers were beaten and cut. 2 fell with bullet wounds and were hospitalized. They survived, although at the time the others understood that they were dead. The strikers abandoned the football stadium at a meeting place because it was too close to the NUM and began to assemble instead on a koppie, or a rocky hill, that stood on a wide plain of wasteland near one of the settlements. They collected cash and sent for a local sangoma, or traditional healer, in the hope that he could protect them from violence. Then others joined the strike, not just the rock drill operators who started it, but other Lonmin workers, who were furious when they heard the NUM was colluding with the company and had shot 2 of their comrades. The violence escalated. The following day, Sunday the 12th of August, a group of about 150 strikers marched from their new base on the Koppie to the Lonmin offices. There were scuffles. A striker threw a rock. A security guard fired a shotgun. The strikers massed forward. Some of the workers were now carrying pangas, and they used them with deadly force, slashing one guard from armpit to hip and hacking 2 more to death. One of the bodies was burnt beyond recognition. Over the following 24 hours, 2 miners were killed when they tried to go to work in the hours of darkness. For 15 minutes there was no firing. Then 2 groups of officers closed in on one of the smaller koppies. Several dozen strikers were now hiding amongst its rocks and bushes. Police opened an explosion of intense fire, 295 bullets, many aimed from the top of the koppie down at the shapes of men huddling below. 17 more men died there. Police in one of the helicopters were lobbing stun grenades at fleeing miners. Look back at these events. The Farlam inquiry uncovered faults on all sides, the opening violence by Lonmin and the NUM, a complete absence of investigation of that violence by the South African Police Service, barbaric behaviour by those strikers who had killed people who defied them, and an apparent callous decision by Lonham. As counsel to the Farlam inquiry put it, it appeared that it was possible for Lonmin to close the mine in order to protect its workers, but that was for business reasons. It elected not to do so. But in contrast with the Sharpeville massacre, where white policemen had to fight for their lives against an angry mob of over 15,000, the Marikana massacre slowly was wiped under the carpet as the stakeholders in this deadly duel were black, such as Cyril Ramaphosa, and no media outcry or special day of remembrance was called out to commemorate the dead black mine workers massacred by black policemen on orders from black politicians and black stakeholders at Marikana. No special commemoration was held or history remembered for the innocent dead victims of the Church Street bomb. No commemoration for the 4,000 white farmers murdered since 1994. It's much more convenient to blame a white apartheid than a black democracy if one wants to retain power in South Africa. After all, the British media have made sure that whites in South Africa are labelled next to Hitler as the most atrocious white supremacists in the world, a bunch of neo-Nazis, right-wingers that thoroughly enjoy killing innocent black people for the fun of it. Sharpeville are still well commemorated to this day to ensure that new generations of blacks fully understand the struggle against the white colonials, whereas the Marikana massacre are quietly removed from the history books to ensure that new black generations still vote for the silent killers in control. Meanwhile, the ANC communists and their devious media goals keep our memories alive with the Sharpeville incident, for the deceptive lie to stay in power and the division between races must be maintained to follow the divide and conquer strategy. As it is with communism throughout the ages, the Sharpeville tragedy and the death of so many innocent people, black and white, are exploited to enhance personal, hidden agendas and retain power. Now, that's a very, very informative and well-written piece. Thank you so much, Gerard. All right, guys, please remember to subscribe to be kept informed. Ring the bell for the updates. Please click the like button and have a safe day.